Cue the Gregorian chants, because right now we are in one of the most beautiful cathedrals, basilicas ever built. The second largest Christian structure in the entire world. This is St. Peter's Basilica in the smallest country in the entire world, the Vatican City. I'm Ariel with Urbanus, and today we're going to explore the history of the Vatican City from the sack of 1527 to the martyrdom of St. Peter, the rock that Jesus designated to carry on the legacy of Christendom. And we're going to learn about the beautiful sculptures of Bernini and how Bernini's rivalry with his other architect, Borromini, almost made the entire St. Peter's Basilica collapse underneath all this beautiful grounds. Let me know where you're watching from. I'm Ariel with Urbanus, and let's walk around. Hello Donna, hello Irene, hello Kay. Nice to see you here. We are inside St. Peter's Basilica right here in the middle of the Eternal City. However, we're no longer in the Eternal City. We're no longer in Italy because the Vatican City is its own country. A country only 100 acres big with a population of 800 people. Welcome, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm Ariel with Urbanus, and let's walk around St. Peter's Basilica and learn all about Vatican City. Let me know where you're watching from, and I'm so excited to show you this beautiful place. I've been wanting to do a live stream here for the longest time. This is one of the places that always blew me away the first time I visited Rome. I actually bumped into it randomly. I didn't have any itinerary. I kind of just walked and saw a massive line outside, went on the line, and boom, I was here in the St. Peter's Basilica. And that was a few years ago, and that's stuck in my mind ever since, because there's so many beautiful artworks. And at that time, I didn't know about Bernini, I didn't know about Michelangelo, or Borromini, or Benamonte, all these wonderful architects and artists. I didn't know about them. But now I do, and now I'm going to share you the stories of these wonderful artists that built the rock. Why is it called the rock? Well, because St. Peter is not his real name. St. Peter is a designation by Jesus Christ. He called him my rock, Pietro. Pietro means rock. In Spanish is piedra. In many other languages, Petrus, Peter. All these words come from rock. The rock that Jesus designated was right here for St. Peter to start a new era in spirituality and moving the teachings of Jesus forward onto the global stage. And this pretty much was the city to do so back in 60 AD. However, things came crashing down just a year later in 61 AD. We'll learn about that a little bit later as we walk around St. Peter's Basilica and go outside into the Vatican City grounds. But first, before we go deep into ancient Roman history, let's learn about the most popular of all the Baroque sculptors. That man is Bernini. His work is all around Rome, but the most famous one is right around the corner. Let's check it out. Buongiorno. Same in Greek, Petra is rock. Yeah, I think it might be a Greek origin, the Petra. All right, let's go and see the Pietà. Brace yourselves, everyone. At the age of 25, Michelangelo made a sculpture. Now, he didn't merely sculpt. According to Michelangelo, he freed the figures from the marble. The marble collected nearby Rome. This was his first major work that skyrocketed him into fame. This is the Pieta, Virgin Mary with a dying Jesus Christ or a dead Jesus Christ in her arms. This was made by Bernini. Now Bernini, this was made by Michelangelo. We're going to learn more about Bernini as we go along. Now Michelangelo is one of the most famous sculptors of the Renaissance era. So we're going to talk from the Renaissance all the way to the Baroque. Now the interesting thing about this work by Michelangelo, who did it at a mere age of 25 years old, is that you can see the ripples in the skin of Jesus. Now it's completely covered by bulletproof glass because a man many decades ago threw a rock and tried to dismantle the Pieta. Now that is one of many Michelangelo works we're going to see throughout this tour, along with Bernini, Borromini, and a few others. So that was absolutely beautiful. Let's keep moving on and show you more of the Basilica. Now Michelangelo was more than just a sculptor. He was an architect. He helped build this huge basilica. But why did this basilica get built here in the first place? And why is it so huge? Well, for that, we have to go back to the 1300s. Back in the 1300s, the Pope actually resided in a Lateran palace across the city in Rome. This wasn't his headquarters. This was a tiny little church called St. Peter's, but it was already decrepit, falling down, and a fire broke loose and was damaging the church even more. So the Pope sought to rebuild. This Pope was one of the most ambitious popes of them all, but then later in the 1500s, Pope Julius II. It looks almost real, the Pieta. Yeah, it does, it is. Hello, Irene. The sculpture La Pieta blown me away by far. One of the most wonderful works of art I've seen. I'm glad we started off the right foot. Was the queue long? The queue was not long because I skipped the queue. So the normal queue was about 3-hour wait around the Colonnade. I skipped it by buying a $19 ticket and only had a wait of precisely 1 minute. I'll be sharing that information towards the end in the comments. Right here, we're approaching the canopy, the papal canopy, built, sculpted by Bernini. Gian Lorenzo Bernini, like Michelangelo before him, was a superstar in the European stage. Sorry, there might be very bad service here because it is a very tight, heavy stone building. But I'll stay further away from the walls. So right behind it, we have the high altar of the Pope behind the canopy with the dove flying in the middle. Looks like beautiful sun, rays of sunlight popping through. And then we see the image of a dove flying through these rays of light. Okay, I was going to say this story outside, but I don't think you'll deeply appreciate it as much the inside if I don't say it right now. How did this get even started? Well, 61 AD. This hill was called Vatican Hill. Now, no one really knows where the word Vatican comes from for sure, but there are theories. The major theory is that this was before the Romans really became a power. The Etruscans took over most of Rome. And let me actually go down here. Before Romans were ever in power, the Etruscans had dominion over the city, and their high priests that were prophets that looked into the future were have said to be based right here in Vatican Hill. Now, the name of these priests are called Vents, and that might be the theory as to why this is named Vaticanus or Vatican. But then many centuries later, Rome became a huge power. The Republic turned into an empire. And a few generations after Augustus, the great Emperor Augustus, the empire started going into a slight decline with its heirs. The first major heir to decline was Caligula. And Caligula built a circus right here in Vatican Hill. A circus is not the modern conception of a circus we know today. It's more kind of like a huge circular or more like an elongated oval shaped racetrack where they had chariot horse races, gladiatorial battles, and also they had crucifixions of people who did not abide by Roman rule. Caligula did not last for too long, and we'll learn a little bit later why he didn't. But who took over was Nero, and Nero ended up being associated with the Antichrist for a very good reason. Because Nero, after Rome burnt down to the ground, he used Christians as a scapegoat, and he blamed it on them for burning down Rome. Through that blame, he actually ended up crucifying and killing Christians right here in his circus. He ended up naming the circus after him, so this ended up becoming Nero's circus. Right in the middle of this huge circus, one of the apostles of Jesus was murdered. His name, as I mentioned, is St. Peter. Not his actual name, he had a different name. Peter was his designation, the Rock. And he asked one specific favor. He did not dare to be killed the same way that his own Lord Jesus Christ was crucified. He wanted to be crucified in reverse. So St. Peter was crucified in reverse, upside down, here in modern-day St. Peter's Basilica. His body and his remains were found a few decades later, and they were buried right underneath this canopy in the crypt of St. Peter. That crypt you can still visit today, however, you do need to reserve months in advance to visit it. And that's why this place is considered one of the most holiest places in all of Christendom. No matter if you're Roman Catholic or Protestant, it's still a very monumental place because this is where Christianity really came upon the world stage. Rome was the center of the Western world, at least. On the other side of the world, it was China. But for half of the world, it was Roman. And if you did not worship the Roman emperor, you were a heretic in essence. You were a heretic. You were kind of a person who wasn't abiding by the rules, and you would be murdered. However, for the Christians, they didn't mind being murdered, executed, because their own Lord Jesus Christ was crucified. To be crucified, to die as a sacrifice for your religion, for your beliefs, for a higher spirituality, that felt worth it. And that really confused the Romans. They were really confused by these Christians that just wanted to die. But for them, it was the deepest of honors. And also, they were very desperate people at that time. They lived underground. They set up underground roads along the Appian Way outside of Rome. They worshipped in secret. Romans didn't care what God you prayed to. They didn't care about Christus, which was the name of Christ as we know today. They didn't care this guy. He was already dead. They might have adopted him into the pantheon of gods if the Christians allowed them. And some Christians actually wanted that. But they did not want to deify anyone else aside from Christ. They wanted to worship just Christ, the God, and the Holy Spirit. And that's what made the Christians very different. They rebelled against Roman rule, and hence Nero reciprocated with St. Peter right here. And apparently St. Peter's bones still remain underneath this very canopy. I would love to see in person. I tried to reserve. I haven't got any word back, but maybe next time I come to Italy, I'll visit the crypt and maybe make a video of it. Hello, Rosaline. Hello, Natalia. Hello, Christine. Hello, Gary. Saludos de Peru. I bet you know that there are lines in the floor showing the sizes of other churches to show that they're the biggest or something like that. You know, I actually did not know that. That is a very interesting fact. And I've heard that lettering is 6 feet high because it doesn't seem so. So we are looking at a dome right now built by Michelangelo. It rises 482 feet high into the sky. The canopy itself might look small compared to the much larger dome, but the canopy itself is 8 stories tall. So in essence, you could fit New York City's vessel inside here, underneath the dome of St. Peter's. Now, this is actually not the largest Roman Catholic church. The largest one is in the Ivory Coast. This is number 2. And if you remember, we have visited the 5th largest Christian church, which is St. John the Divine in New York City. So we have 2 down, 3 more to go. Natalia, increíble los detalles. Oh, sí, bien increíble. Feel free to let me know any questions you might have. And let's actually look a little bit at the details of these sculptures. And I'll show you more around. I'm just blown away. If you want me to focus on anything, let me know. Massive. So this is the transept that we're looking. The nave is about 800 feet long, so it's massive. Hello, Gonza de Argentina. Oh, qué bien que hay muchos argentinos mirando. El Papa de Argentina. Mejor lo veo y lo digo hola. The Pope is Argentinian. Maybe I'll see him and say hello. So here is Saint Longvis. This was another Beautiful sculpture made by Bernini. Now, Bernini is quite a talent, as opposed to, I mean, not as opposed, but definitely very innovative after the Renaissance sculptors like Michelangelo. If you notice, a lot of the Renaissance sculptures like the Pieta, they're still. You know, there is a sense of contemplation, of stillness, of mourning with the Pieta. It's also very kind of geometric. The Pieta is basically a triangle if you look at the overall shape. But Bernini and the other Baroque artists in his time broke out of that basic geometric shapes. They broke out of the contemplation and the stillness, and they made movement in the clothing, movement in the facial expressions, drama filled with life. This is one such sculpture where we can see the life burst out of the marble. And it's kind of crazy to think that it is marble. As Michelangelo said, that he freed the figures from the marble. In a way, Bernini did so too. But he freed something different. He freed something wild. Now this is the spear that pierced Christ on his side, giving the final blow before he died. Lucinda, you were here 2 weeks ago, so I'm enjoying your narrative. Amazing. Robert, you enjoy the floor mosaics? Yeah, they're gorgeous. Look at that. Amazing. So, the spear. The spear is very interesting because apparently fragments of the spear still remain right underneath our feet right now in the crypt of St. Peter. The spear, or the fragments of the spear, is one of the many relics that this church owns. Many religious institutions all around Europe own some type of relic. We saw another relic in the grounds of Notre Dame, or actually the grounds of Saint-Chapelle. However, it's interesting because there's only fragments of the spear. What happened to the rest of the spear? Well, that's contentious. There's a few theories. One, that the spear is somewhere else. A few other countries claim to have the spear, one of them being Armenia. Armenia claims to have the spear. No one knows if that's true. Another interesting thing about the spear is that it might have actually been stolen, and no one knows really where it is. It might have been stolen in 1527, when Rome was sacked by Lutheran Germans, pissed off Spaniards, and a rival family that wanted to take over Rome. For that, we'll learn about it as we go outside. Fun fact, the letters across the top are surrounded by gold given by the New World from Spain and Portugal. Oh, thank you for that, Debbie. Yeah, I did not know that. That's interesting. We did talk about that yesterday in the other church we visited, Santa Maria Maggiore. So it's nice to see a lot of New World gold end up in these churches. The new meets the old. Those letters are 6 feet tall. Wow, they're taller than me. Well, the same size as me. Evelyn says fascinating. All right, let's check this out.
Underneath the altar, a picture in the hole.
Dat vind ik vrijloos als krijgen deze.
Let's take a look at the high altar. Here we have, actually before we go to the high altar, here we have Santa Veronica. George, great. Love that. I'll repeat that. Speaking of stealing, how did they steal the spear from a Roman soldier? It was an imperial issue. Great joke. Right over there we have Santa Veronica. But wait, did someone graffiti on Santa Veronica? This beautiful Bernini sculpture? No, this is not graffiti. It represents something that's not made with human hands, not made by human touch at all. It's the Shroud of Santa Veronica. For that, we have to go back to the life of Jesus Christ. Jesus went over to a poor woman who had a terrible hemorrhage. Her name was Veronica. And as he went to Veronica, she was wearing a shroud. And he came to her, either did something with his hands, not entirely sure the full details. But by the time Jesus was done with her hemorrhage was cured. As Jesus was being crucified, a few years later, the woman saw Jesus as he was carrying the cross. And she was wearing that same shroud she was wearing when she was cured of that hemorrhage. And in order to swipe the sweat from his brow, she used her shroud. And as she took back the shroud and let Jesus be on his way, she opened it up and saw an imprint of Jesus' face. This was no regular imprint. This looked like it was made by human hands, but it wasn't at all. It's a mysterious image. This image ended up becoming a relic. And a lot of people claim also to have the Shroud of Veronica, very similar to the Shroud of Turin. There are actually two different shrouds. The Shroud of Veronica might be here as well, but no one knows for sure. A lot of other countries also claim to have the Shroud of Veronica. Bernini here is just merely showcasing how the shroud looks like. So that drawing is probably made by Bernini, so it's not graffiti. Santa Veronica and the face of Jesus Christ. The sculpture in Rome completely blew me away while I was there. There's plenty of sculpture in New York and Paris, but Rome is on another level. I agree, something about Bernini and Michelangelo just make these figures come to life, and we'll see more of them tomorrow in Galleria Borghese, and a little bit more tonight when we go to the Vatican Museum. So actually speaking about the image of Jesus Christ, I'll tell you one Vatican secret before we continue with our tour. This one is not history. This one is conspiracy. So take this with a grain of salt. But many decades ago, I think it was around the 1950s, 60s, one of the men who work in the Vatican, specifically work underground in the Vatican archives, claimed to have a device that was developed by the Vatican themselves called the Chronovisor. The Chronovisor apparently is this type of like VR lens where you can see historical events in full clarity. And you can record historical events. He claimed to have gone back and seen the speeches from Caesar, or actually from Cicero, and was absolutely inspired by them. He claimed to have seen the death of Jesus Christ. After this man came out with the story, an image was published in the Italian newspapers, all around the Italian newspapers. It was the image of Jesus Christ, a photograph. He claimed that that photograph was taken with the Chronovisor, this device that apparently is in the Vatican. It was found out that image was actually taken from a postcard. It wasn't real. But something weird happened. A few months later, that same man who broke the news ended up saying that everything was shut down. The Vatican did not allow anyone to come into the archives for quite a while, and something happened underneath the closed doors of the Vatican. Again, that's conspiracy, so take that with a grain of salt. Let's go back to history. So here's the high altar of Bernini. And Bernini again with all the drama, with this gold gilded sculpture, rays of light shining through, and also the high altar elevated, almost like 2 stories tall. Debbie, you love the story about Veronica. My grandmother was named after her. Oh, wonderful. Okay, one more look at the canopy and let's continue outside. I could be here forever, and I recommend you replay the video if you want to capture more of these details. Let's move on with the show. Oh, George, for that no one knows. But apparently all mentions of the Chronovisor suddenly disappeared. The name did appear in various documents, but those documents were never found again. The man who leaked that information passed away a few years later, natural causes, but he never spoke about it again. It was almost as if the Chronovisor never existed. According to some conspiracy theories as well, of course this is not history, they believed that the Chronovisor was too powerful of a tool and they hence discontinued it. I'm not entirely sure. That does not look like a cardinal, but it might be. Let me know if you know your Christian ranks a lot. It might be just a priest, but if it's a higher official, let us know. And yeah, so much opulence all around us. Again, I can be here forever. I highly recommend all of you watching the replay. Lou, you ordered your Urbanist mug today. Welcome. Awesome. Welcome to the club. If you want to get your Urbanist merch, go to teespring.com/Urbanist. Be sure to post a photo on the Urbanist of the World group with your mug. That's so awesome.
Statue of Liberty, I did that. And that was this long, narrow staircase. One would come down, precipice going up like spiral ups. Me and my mom did it together.
Hello, everyone. Priscilla, you're watching my live since 2016. Welcome. So glad you're watching, still watching. Wow. And Mosa Iglesia, have you been to the replica in Montreal? Yeah, I've been. I didn't know it was a full replica. It looks a lot plainer than this one. Obviously, because probably they want to spend so much money in it. Okay, let's walk inside. This is a chapel. I hope I still have service, crossing fingers. And I'll be a lot quieter.
Please don't stop here. Move, please.
Oh, and George, you're right. They're made of micro mosaics. Thanks for reminding us. So that's why they haven't faded. All right, let's see what's here in the Museo Tesoro. I had a feeling. And we were back. I had a feeling that there was going to be no service whatsoever in that museum. Also, it's paid entrance, which I'll be going back to the Vatican Museum later tonight, so stay tuned for that. This St. Peter's Basilica, all the way at the end, absolutely magical church to visit. And if you're watching right now, let your friends and family know about this broadcast so they can join in live through these Rome adventures. This is episode 2 of the Mysteries of the Eternal City out of 12. So stay tuned every single day until the 21st. I'll be going live at 3 p.m. Rome time, 9 a.m. New York City time. Let's go outside to the grounds, the Colonnade of Vatican City, and learn about a rivalry between Bernini and his contemporary architect, Borromini. Let's go outside. Go outside. Say goodbye to the Pietà. Let's go outside. Those paintings are micro mosaics. Indeed, they are. Massive iron doors over here. And get ready to see the colonnade of Vatican City, the smallest country in the world with a population of 800 people. No one's really born a citizen of Vatican. You have to be working here as a member of the clergy or the Swiss Guard or the security force. Actually, I think the security force are probably Italians, but the Swiss Guard are Vatican passport holders. And here we have the Grand Colonnade of Vatican City. Now, the interesting thing about the colonnade is that if we were to go all the way to the top of the dome of St. Peter's Basilica and look down towards the colonnade, we would see it looks like an oval shape, but it's open and it extends a little bit. So it looks like two hands extending outward towards Rome, or offering the religion, the spirituality of Christendom off into the greater world. Now, this colonnade was made by Lorenzo Bernini, the man who made all those beautiful sculptures and the canopy inside. Michelangelo made a good portion of the basilica and the dome, but Bernini made the outside. Bernini almost destroyed St. Peter's Basilica because I mentioned Bernini was a superstar. At the age of 25, he was already making these genius sculptures. A few years later, he was the top of his game. Everyone wanted to work with him. But he had a rival who was better at making architecture than him. Bernini was an excellent sculptor, and he knew a lot about architecture. But Bernini, his contemporary, was a genius architect. Bernini was very carefree, charismatic. People loved him. He was the talk of the town, the center of attention in every single room. But Bernini, he was shy, introverted, serious about his work. And also, he didn't get along too much with his clients. So, both of them did not get along at all. Instead of working together, they worked at odds with each other, competing for the same jobs. And that job that they were competing for was to put the finishing touches on St. Peter's Basilica. Those finishing touches were controversial, because Bernini simply wanted to do a few finishing touches to the dome and kind of let it be and maybe add an extra layer of facade. Bernini proposed something way crazier. Bernini dared to rise higher than his predecessor, Michelangelo, and wanted to build St. Peter's Basilica further up into the air with two huge towers at each end. However, the land that we're standing on right now, for good reason, was made into a circus. Because this land isn't good land. This land is not good land to build upon. It's very muddy and very swampy.
Prego, signore. Hello. Pure quella, ragazzi.
Okay, you've been blessed by two popes there so far, Pope John and Pope Benedict. Ooh, wonderful. And oh, it's stunning. Will you be there on Sunday to wave to the Pope? Most likely. Either this Sunday or the next. Actually, probably this Sunday. Right in front of us, we have the Swiss Guard. It's about 150-ish Swiss Guard in the Vatican. They're all Swiss. They're all between the ages of 18 to 30 years old. And they are all at least 8.5 feet and inches tall. They're all required to wear that costume as well, and they've been in use since about 1521. George, yes, St. Peter's still standing, but there are limits to any piece of land. There's a reason why they don't build a skyscraper church here, for example, because you can't. There's a reason why there was very tall buildings in the middle of the city of London, but you still can't build that many tall skyscrapers on the scale of the Shard. Land always has its limits. The limit was the dome, 452 feet rising into the air. But any more than that was spelling for trouble. And Borromini knew that. So he didn't say anything. Borromini tried at first, lightly, sent like a letter to Bernini, who got this huge contract, despite Bernini not being the best architect. Borromini was the best architect by all reasonable standards. Bernini might have been more famous, might have been a better sculptor and painter and showman, but Borromini was definitely a talented architect. And he sent a letter saying, hey, you gotta like look at these numbers, because if you put any more weight that's already here with the Basilica and the 400 feet dome, something's going to happen. Bernini never read the letter. Bernini actually didn't care for the opinion of anyone else, and he wanted to best even the master Michelangelo. So he continued off with his plans of building 2 massive towers on the side of the dome. These towers will have risen around 550 feet high into the air. Definitely much larger than the dome itself. This was controversial because a lot of people respected Michelangelo, and they didn't want to compete with Michelangelo's already impressive work with the dome. But Bernini, he had a much larger appetite for fame. He wanted more and more and more. He was already the most famous man in Italy, most famous man in Europe, but yet he still wanted more. So he was going to build his 500-foot tower, 2 of them. The first tower started being built. Borromini made more calculations, this time in private, and he knew with the full certainty that it was going to collapse. He started making drawings showing exactly where the cracks were going to appear, exactly how the tower was going to buckle under its own weight. However, Borromini let Bernini do his thing. He knew that he would be the man who came out correct in this rivalry. Bernini's tower kept climbing up and up and up and up. And despite it seeming a little bit unsteady, despite the stone seeming a bit worn out, Bernini continued pushing ahead. Apparently, he did not take no for an answer. He was surrounded by yes men. As I mentioned, he's the most famous man in all of Europe. No one was going to say no to Bernini because this man was a genius. No way he could have been wrong. It's like George Lucas in the Star Wars prequels. He's a master. He invented the most amazing movies ever. No way he could have been wrong. Bernini was the same, surrounded by yes men. Everyone thought he was right, and if they disagree with him, they will send yes anyway because, you know what, he's a genius. Then one day, as Bernini is talking with the Pope is concerned not about the structural integrity, because the Pope also thinks Bernini is a genius, but he's concerned about the money that Bernini is spending. Might be a little bit too much, maybe a little bit too ambitious. Suddenly, the Basilica shakes. A crack, massive crack, appears right through the first tower that's being built. Quickly, Borromini comes to the rescue. The Pope consults with him and asks him, what's happening? Do you have any insight? He says, yeah, the tower is going to collapse. Here's the papers, here's the drawings. This is exactly how it's going to collapse. If Bernini continues building it anymore, the tower would collapse on itself and destroy St. Peter's Basilica. The Pope did not want this at all. No one at all wanted this disaster to happen. So Bernini was disgraced, kicked off the project, and never to be hired again. Borromini took over, dismantled the towers carefully, as to not destroy the rest of the structural integrity of a church that's already built on not the most stable ground. And luckily, Bernini made his other adjustments, and St. Peter's Basilica was saved. But Bernini's reputation, his career, was destroyed until he sculpted one particular sculpture, Teresa in Ecstasy. For that, stay tuned next week as we visit that sculpture that saved Bernini's career. But let's talk a little bit about the Swiss Guard. Hey, are you going to the Scavvy tour? You know what? I signed up for the Scavvy tour, which is the tour for the Acropolis. Haven't heard back. I sent the email about a week before I came here. So from what I heard, it takes months to get access to it. So, you know, I did it with too short of a notice. So I wish I could go, but no word yet. But who knows? Maybe I'll get lucky and somehow they'll give me access within this next week I'm here. So thank God for Bernini being a much smarter architect. Bernini, a genius, but everyone has their flaws. And Gerard, you say I have to hand it to you. You do your homework. I never heard about these towers. Yeah, it's not so spoken about. It's a very interesting small story. I think the church itself was very disgraced by this entire ordeal, that they kind of just never talked about it again. But you can find out more information by searching Simon Schama's writings on Bernini. He covers almost everything. He's an art historian and covers the entire ordeal of the towers. Right in front of us is one of the 32 obelisks, 32-ish obelisks, all in Rome. This obelisk stands in its entirety. It's about 50 meters tall, including the base. It was imported from Egypt, and it's the only obelisk to have never collapsed in Rome. The other ones, unfortunately, they're still standing, but all of them have at some point collapsed at least once. This one has never collapsed before and was brought over by Caligula himself. As I mentioned, Caligula built the Circus around here, and the shape of this entire facility actually follows almost the same shape as the Circus. Now, the interesting thing about these obelisks is that they were adopted by the Roman Catholic religion in order to show that they carried the mantle of civilization forward from the Egyptians. The Romans did so, and then the Roman Catholics continued on that tradition. And that's why they adopted this huge obelisk in the middle of Vatican City. But something interesting about these obelisks, as we continue to see more and more when we walk around, all around Rome, is, let's go back to Cleopatra's Needle in New York City. There's two other Cleopatra's Needles. There's one in Paris and there's one in London. If you see my Hidden History episode, Hidden History number 2, many months ago, back in February, talked about how difficult it was for Americans in the 1800s, with all their ingenuity, with all their massive advantage in technology compared to most of the world at that time, had an incredible ordeal to bring those obelisks of the same size from Egypt all the way to New York City. The English also had the same issue. So much so that they lost one of their obelisks en route to London. The Parisians, too. Really difficult. Cranes broke in the 1800s trying to bring those obelisks over there. They didn't have sufficient power to do so. Somehow, they did it. But that was with 1800s technology, and it was a massive ordeal for 3 technologically advanced civilizations, nations, to move it. How did the ancient Romans do it then? There was no mechanical propulsion at the time of ancient Rome. There was no cranes in ancient Rome. No one knows. No one knows for sure. There's, of course, theories, but no one knows 100% for sure how they moved these multiple ton heavy obelisks to Rome. So one of the mysteries. Keep that in mind as we walk around, all around Rome. Liz, saludos de Tijuana. Gracias por mirando. Thank you for watching from Tijuana. Can't wait to go one day to Mexico. Lots of history also in Mexico. Also a lot of churches in Mexico as well. Look at this beautiful fountain. Wow. The bird is there showering, chilling in the water. Hey, Naomi. Welcome. Here is the post. Madeline? So, a lot of people might say, yeah, manpower, obviously. Just, you get 50 men to carry this obelisk. For context, this obelisk is anywhere between 3 tons, 3,000 to 5,000 pounds heavy. That's a whole lot of weight for men to carry. It's really hard. And George, you say there were cranes. Well, there were cranes, but not powered by mechanical propulsion. So not as advanced as they were in the 1800s, that's for sure. Or at least as we think that we assume was advanced. And love my shirt. Oh, thank you so much. So right here we have the Vatican Post. Vatican Post apparently is more efficient than the Roman Post. That's what people say. So the Vatican City has their own postal service. They have their own army, their own standing army, which is the Swiss Guard. And they also have their own railroad. But how did the Vatican become its own country? Because before the Vatican was ever a country, it was its own, it was the head power of this area of Italy. It was called the Papal States. The Pope, for many, many centuries, had overwhelming power in Europe. But that was until 1527. Just a few short years after the Swiss Guard were hired to protect the Pope. 1527, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V started gathering men supporting the Lord of Bourbon over there in Spain. The Lord of Bourbon hired Spanish soldiers and also hired a huge army of Germans. 11,000 Germans to be precise, and about 1,000 Spaniards. They first tried to attack Florence, but Florence wasn't protected. So they bypassed Florence and came over here to Rome, right to the walls of the Vatican. However, the Lord of Bourbon was wearing this very bright white and gold encrusted suit of armor, leading the charge of these Germans and also these Spaniards. The thing is, if you're wearing white and gold in front of the lines of the infantry, you are the biggest, most obvious target. So the Lord of Bourbon, just a few meters away, was killed by a Roman soldier. He apparently screamed, "I am dead," and he was carried off and died a few hours later. This, in most circumstances, would have kind of disengaged most of the army. They had no leader, their lord wasn't there, so, why fight? But these Germans had a vendetta because something was happening in Germany at the same time. The Reformation. Martin Luther was rebelling against the Catholic Church because of one important reason. How did they build St. Peter's Basilica? Well, Pope Julius II started collecting a massive amount of indulgences, asking people, friars and priests all around the realm, to have people pay to relieve themselves of their sins. That's how Pope Julius II gathered so much money for St. Peter's Basilica. But this pissed off the Lutherans. Martin Luther himself railed against this and railed against many other things, such as the Mass only being allowed to be read in Latin, excluding a lot of the common people who did not know Latin, which was at the time a dead language, to know what was the scripture about. But he was also pissed off at how the Roman Catholic Church was corrupt, at least in his opinion. Now, I won't get into the politics of the religion in that case, but the Germans nonetheless were pissed off. Also, the Germans were desperate for some loot. Because coming to Rome, those German soldiers, not only were they pissed off at the Pope, the entire institution of the Roman Catholic Church, but they also knew that there was a whole lot of money to be gained by looting the Roman Catholic Church. All that gold, all those relics, all those fine jewelry and sculptures. So the Pope, hiding beneath his walls, knew that he was being overrun by all these Germans, and he started escaping along the Colonnade. The Germans apparently started playing a game, trying to see the Pope's hat kind of stick out of the railings, and they started trying to shoot. But the Pope had something up his sleeve. He had a secret passage that ran underneath the very area of Vatican City, all the way towards a fortification. Let's take a peek at it as we walk outside of Vatican City. Anna! God bless you. They were man-powered. They used a huge drum of men, walked in and turned the gears like a hamster cage. Interesting, yeah. Horses or elephants. That is definitely a theory that a lot of people say as well. But then again, in the 1800s, they still had a difficult time moving the obelisk with horses as well. So horses alone can't get it done. David, you were brought up Lutheran. Oh, amazing. And George, when you were a kid, Mass was said in Latin. Oh, and you still remember the words. Interesting, that was said in Latin. I wonder when they transitioned fully into other languages. I think it was Pope John II who finally allowed local communities to say their Mass in their own language. And they didn't have to be kind of one of the major languages like Italian or Spanish or English, but it could have been Nahuatl, like in Mexico, or it could have been, Venetian or these other dialects that are all around Europe, South America, or around the world. Your stories about all the places fill the gaps that regular tourists don't get to know unless you read and investigate, like I'm doing. Thanks for all your work. And don't seem to be too many beggars around. No, not at all. There's not that many beggars at all. So, wow, here is Vatican City from the outside. And yes, the Vatican Council in 64. Oh, thank you, George, for clarifying. You know, Rome is kind of devoid of beggars. Not that many homeless also around, at least not in the touristy areas. I haven't explored too much of the outskirts yet. But in the touristy areas, no. It's a very calm city. I really like it. Vibrant. A lot of people always around. Restaurants are always filled up with people. Great food everywhere. But also calm in the sense where there's not that much commotion or weird people in the streets. It's really nice. But I'll talk more about that in different broadcasts. Let's finish up this story. Actually, let's just walk up to the castle. Let's do it. C'est la vie. Attraversiamo. Let's cross it. So underneath this passageway, the Pope started going over and over to a certain other structure that is on the other side of the Vatican. Right now, we just did a Facebook Live broadcast in 2 different countries because I am no longer in the Vatican. I am now back in Italy. So, first Facebook Live broadcast in 2 different countries ever. Mission accomplished. Now, as the Pope was running away, his Swiss guard were fighting valiantly and holding the German hordes back. 150-ish, around there, Swiss guard were killed trying to defend the Pope. There was 11,000 plus men. Rome only had a population of about 50,000. According to some estimates, about 14,000 people were killed or raped. The Germans sacked the city. They went inside the Vatican and apparently stole a few relics. They got down to the crypt of St. Peter, and according to some accounts, again, I don't know if this is 100% true, they stole the lance that pierced Jesus. Where is that lance today? As I mentioned, no one really knows. Some countries claim to own it. The Vatican claims to own a few fragments, but the lance apparently still exists in its entirety, somewhere out there. The Germans also stole a bunch of works all around the Vatican, but they were unable to catch the Pope because the Pope was really protected right in this fortification that we're coming upon right now in front of the Vatican. Hey Tuba, welcome. And yes, I did not have to go through customs nor passports. It was completely easy to do so. That was amazing. 2 countries, 1 Facebook Live. Now, the Vatican used to be a very interesting kind of structure to come across because right now there's a huge kind of beautiful boulevard that leads up to Vatican. But before this neighborhood of Prati used to be a bunch of crisscross tiny little streets, mostly of very poor residents. So in order to get to the Vatican, if you were a pilgrim in the, say, early 1700s, you have to go through these tiny claustrophobic dark streets and alleyways, crisscrossing all of them through Prati neighborhood, and then boom, out of nowhere, you'll come across the Vatican. Of course, that changed later on in the late 1800s. Actually, a little bit later, I think, it was more towards the 1900s that they needed to have more wider streets, just in case, in order to squash any revolts, and also to have better protection and better traffic flow. Are there shops in Vatican City? There's a few shops for souvenirs in the Vatican City, yes. And you'll be seeing more Vatican City later tonight at the Vatican Museum. Stay tuned for that. So this passageway is quite long, but you can imagine the Pope walking along these walls. I'm unclear whether the passageway was on the wall itself or underneath it, but right there we see the Vatican walls. And we're coming across a castle that is named Sant Angelo, the castle of the angel, right there in the distance. Why is it called Sant Angelo? Well, it's because, according to legend, when one of the attacks on Rome was happening many years prior to the sack of 1527, an angel appeared on the very top of the castle and the attack ceased. That angel is represented currently up there with that bronze sculpture. one of the many accounts throughout Europe of angels appearing in public. The other one being the angels of Mons. That was one of the most recent ones and one of the biggest ones after the cast of Sant Angelo, where an angel appeared in the battlefield during World War I, making both sides of the battle stop in their tracks. But that is for another day, whenever we go to the area of Mons. However, the Pope took that passageway, either here in the walls or right underneath it, and went right inside the Casa Sant Angelo. The Germans had no way of getting in. Yeah.
Is it good, the Osmo?
Oh, it's amazing. I really recommend it.
The 3, it's
Three.
the 3.
Yeah.
I saw it on Amazon, but I did not buy it.
Yeah.
Did you buy it in America?
I bought it in America, yeah.
Yeah,
Amazon.
because they said not available now or something else, but it looks terrific.
It's amazing.
And
It works very
it's
easy.
quiet, the picture is stable.
Very steady all the
Did
time.
you buy this with the tripod?
I have another one that's a lot cheaper.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's very useful as well. You can use any of
but
them.
you
Yeah.
said it's good.
Yeah, it's very
Thank
good.
you
Highly
for
recommend it.
talking.
Have a good day. All right, so I was asked about the gimbal, which always attracts attention. So right there is the Casa Sant Angelo, and it is probably one of the most impenetrable fortresses ever built in humankind. Look how huge it is. At least prior to the super fast advancement of the Third Industrial Revolution. So 1527, the Pope was underneath these walls and they couldn't get in. But the Germans persisted more and more and more. They keep sacking the city. 14,000 were either dead or severely physically harmed. Many others left. The population of 50,000 or so Romans dwindled down to only 10,000 Romans. A far cry from the ancient Roman Empire that used to house 1 million residents. The Germans got in, and they captured the Pope. The Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, who wasn't neither holy nor Roman, nor did he have an empire, ended up capturing the Pope. And in protest, the Pope grew a massive long beard for his mourning. Now, this is very strange for popes because popes are actually not allowed to grow massive beards. That's why it's very easy to spot a pope versus the main leader of the Eastern Orthodox religion or the Russian Orthodox religion. Those guys wear massive beards. Also, I think also the Muslims as well. But not the Pope. Popes are always supposed to be kind of clean shaven. But that Pope ended up being the only bearded Pope that really has ever existed in the modern age. And later on, he was released. But that forever changed the city of Rome. And it made the actual Roman Catholic Church a top target. Because they had a lot of gold and a lot of worth hidden beneath these walls of Casa Sant Angelo and the Vatican City at large. Sorry, there was a bug on my camera. And there we go. That is the epic of Vatican City and this beautiful bridge right here that leads to the other side of the Tiber. If you want to see more videos, let me know. Stay tuned, 3 p.m. every day, Rome time until the 21st of October, 9 a.m. New York City time. If you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed these stories, press that heart button and also let your friends and family know about these live videos that are happening, so you can join along. And if you want to become a supporter and get access to 360 videos, such as videos of the Pantheon and many other landmarks all around Rome to be posted right after the trip, you can do so by becoming a supporter. Think of it as giving a $5 tip to sustain these videos and help it grow, so I can continue visiting these sites and showing it to you on live video, which uses a lot of data. But I love showing it to you live. I don't want to show it to you recorded because I want you to be here with me while we're walking together. That was a long journey. Just like the Pope probably felt like he was going through a long journey, I feel like I need to grow a beard after that huge broadcast. I'll see you later tonight around 7:45, 8 p.m. inside the Vatican Museum. And thank you to Gerard, Vidal for providing some extra information on Michelangelo. Check out Art is Life YouTube because he gave me some great research. Keep being awesome and always keep on exploring. See you later. Arrivederci, amici.